It's like my mirror. We're live 12:46, so it's technically not morning. So it's not the Project Morning Motivation Show, but it is the Project Motivation. It doesn't have to be in the morning. Motivation can come from any time. I'm Milo. Milo's here with me as always. So today we're going to talk about the port matching, and we've talked about port matching before, but I found the reason I want to talk about it this morning is I found an interesting photo. And I used it for the thumbnail, and it's a photo of a big Chevy head. I think that these heads were from the guys at Speedmaster, and they illustrate something that happens an awful lot. In fact, when guys are doing port matching and porting in particular, and it brings up an important point regarding port matching. We've talked before on whether port matching works. Usually, so people know that port matching is when you want the port of the intake port of the intake manifold and the exit of the intake port and the opening of the excuse me, and the opening of the head port. You want them to be the same so that air flows smoothly during that transition. It doesn't hit edges or anything or cause anything weird to happen. There's merit to that, like what I would call a philosophical argument. Whether or not it adds airflow or whether or not it gains power is an individual thing. But here's the thing with port matching, and guys get real overly concerned with that, just like they do with radiusing sharp edges and stuff. All of it can be good, but on the port matching thing, usually, particularly on the cylinder head, the entry of the port is not where big flow gains are going to be found. Now, ultimately, if that becomes the choke point, that's where you would look. But a guy who does head porting on almost any factory head, that's almost never the problem area. In fact, usually in a lot of cases, like a Boss 302 or a 4V Cleveland head is a perfect example. The port's gigantic. The opening of the port is gigantic. Same thing with Super Cobra Jet, big block forward heads and stuff. The opening of the port is really big. That's not where the problem is. That's not where the choke point is. That's not where the thing next down is. And it's not the thing that determines how much that port will actually flow, because there are restrictions elsewhere in the port, elsewhere in the design of the port. If you want to look at how to improve a cylinder head flow, go to Eric Weingartner's, go to David Vizard's channels. There are lots of really good porting guys out there, and they can show you, hopefully with cutaways and diagrams and stuff, where to port particular heads. Like, you want to be specific, well, because they're not all the same. Well, where do I get most of the flow from an LS head? Where do I get most of it from a Boss head? Sometimes you get flow from making the port smaller, not making it big. You don't want to port match it because you don't want to make it any bigger. It's fine the way that it is. And the other fallacy is that somehow the gasket manufacturer knows how big the port should be. The gasket manufacturer just wants the port to seal. They don't want you to make your head to match this gasket. And they're being a little edge where the gasket's bigger than both the intake port and the head port. That's not going to do anything. So don't get don't get worried about that. It's one of the tiny things, and it's the least of your worries, especially if you're talking about port matching an otherwise stock head. Because I can't think of an application where port matching like an otherwise bone stock head is really going to do anything. Where you want to look for big flow gains on a cylinder head is, and it's much harder to find them on the intake manifold, but sometimes there's sharp edges and things in there. But on a cylinder head, you want to look at the bowl area first. You don't want to look at putting bigger valves. Bigger valves can't help. You don't want to look at port matching. Port matching can help, but you're definitely going to get pickup gains from the bowl area. So if you do bowl work, then you do other things, then other things become more important. It's like when you want to put a ported head on an LS motor. Yeah, ported head flows more and it can make more power, just like our old throttle body story. Yeah, bigger throttle body flows more and it can make more power. But it's not going to do that unless you have the other thing. So when you're porting a head, if you do the bowl work, then now you can maybe go to a bigger valve and transition the seat and do all the things that guys that really do head porting know how to do. But the bowl work is, so take a look at what is going to give you the best gain and apply your time and effort there, or your money if you're spending it and having somebody else do it. But on the port matching thing, one of the things that often happens, we talked about this like with the Boss head or the Cleveland head, is where the opening of the port is actually really big. For some reason, the people that design the head just, you got your port going out, and then all of a sudden it like flares out. Oh, it's really big. Look how big that is. It's a Super Cobra jet, or it's a 350, a 4V Cleveland opening. And it's really big. And so, and now the gasket that you put on there is slightly bigger. So you want to port that out even further to go to the gasket. No, you actually don't, because again, that's not going to do anything. Because if you look at the thumbnail photo, that's actually of a big block Chevy. Now, like I said, I thought it was a Speedmaster Pro Comp big block Chevy head that was CNC ported, and they made the opening quite a bit, like the entry of the head port, quite a bit bigger than this thing next down. It like radiuses in and next down. That's because there has to be a hole there for the push rod to go through. So it's what we call the push rod pinch. And so that like where that thing next down so that the push rod can pass through, because there's got to be material there. I mean, you can sleeve it or move the push rod over. You can try to do some fancy things but for most of us, just putting the head on and trying to bolt it on and make power with it, there's going to be a hole there where the push rod is. There needs to be material so that it's sealed, so that you don't draw a bunch of oil in. But if that area is small and the opening and the port is really big, you port matching the opening is just not going to do anything. In fact, an argument can be made that it's going to make it worse. So if you look at the thumbnail photo, hopefully, and for the people that are already here, you could go out and look at it, or maybe you saw it when you came here, or people that are coming here after this already plays in live mode, you can take a look at it and see. But there's no reason to do that. There's no reason for the port to be gigantic. And especially in the case of that big block where it's gigantic and then immediately tapers in. It doesn't have to do that. Like I said, and it not only is it not going to gain anything, it might also be detrimental. So it's not going to be a good choice. So again, ask yourself the right question. Should I port match? Yes, because we want a smooth flow. That's not the right question. What is going to get me the most power? What thing should I do that's going to get me the most power? You could even ask what's going to get me the most airflow, and the port matching thing is not going to be that. It's definitely going to be bulwark. So pay attention to that first and try that, and then see. And actually, you just in terms of port matching, just put the head on, and you'll be just fine. So let's see. I'm going to put up a poll. Have you ever done any port matching? Have you ever port matched a cylinder head to a gasket? Let's see how many people that we've got guys that are building motors and putting them together and stuff. So for instance, if you had an LS, went to the wrecking yard, got a junkyard LS, got a 4.8 or a 5.3, and you took it apart because you're going to put ring gap in it like you should, put ring gap in it before you put it back together. Would you port match the truck manifold to the 706 head? And then how do you make sure that because these are all the questions when it comes to port matching. Also, how do you line up the intake manifold? Because when you line up an intake manifold, unless it's doweled perfectly, it's a precision fit every time, that there's movement in the head, or not movement in the head, movement in the intake manifold relative to the head. So all the work that you did to port match it, if you don't put it on exactly the same every time, it can shift back and forth, and then you have your edge, and you're going to lose all of your big power that you spent all that time. Ford automobiles in the house. you just port match the small block Chevy heads. Special Agent James. So everybody say hi to Oliver. He's here, the guy that won the Nova. He took out the turbo diesel, the one that did the big smoky burnout. Again, that was awesome. And put in a what was supposed to be a running what was supposed to be a running L69 305. It turned out to be not quite that. And just like all projects, they turn out to be more work than we initially thought. We're all ready to go live. It's all the way live. Time to go see the guys at L&R. Guys, tell Derek what's up, man. Mark, happy to help, man. I'm going to go to, let's scroll down a little bit. I want to go to live chat, but I should just start out on live chat. That would make more sense. Does anyone use a pressurized oil accumulator on the street, like the AccuSumps, so that you could open the valve and pre-lube it? That probably would be a good idea. Let's make the mouth of the port the same as the gasket. Wait, the push rod's a bigger obstacle now, and the air doesn't stick to the inner port wall. Have you seen Oliver's video of the Nova? Yeah, he sent it over to me. It does sound good. It's all that fancy exhaust work and the big big pseudo thumper cam he put in there. Do you have any good bass tunes for the LS that we put on your channel? No, I don't do tuning on factory ECUs, and I don't have tunes for the Holly that I use. We just kind of start with something that we know worked before and then modify that. Let's see. Recal, you're gonna do some port matching? Did you ban the guys that voted no the other night? No, that's just it's a reality of the world. So the engine builder I used seems to have done this, but to a gasket that has a small port size is only a bit bigger than the standard. Most of the work is around the guides and bowls. Yeah. Oliver, you guys don't have a flow bench there, right? You didn't flow those heads? What's the most boost you should typically run on a pump gas turbo? You should run the amount that doesn't cause detonation. So it's going to be a function of a lot of things, not just the pump gas, but your intercooling, what your air inlet going into the turbo is, what heads you have, what the detonation threshold is, what the temperature is, lots of stuff. On certain heads, meaning those that don't have big ports, yes, absolutely, matching works. Give me an example of a head that you think port matching does something on. Building a Navigator motor for my Mustang. Will I be able to tell the difference between the Navigator head and the 0304 Cobra head on my motor? No, you won't be able to. $32 degrees outside. Yeah, that is cold. Most of the old parts, I'll be doing port matching on a set of small block Mopar Indy TA heads. Nice for my Turbo 318. Twin turbo Toyota 5.7. Let's see. I'm trying to scroll down here. Is there any advantage to kind of port matching a 494 big block Chevy with steel heads, 488 horsepower at Westech? You'd have to. Can you look in there and see how much different they are, and is that the problem area in the head that you're using? It's probably not. Richard, what camera are you using? A Logi, an HD 1080p LOGI. I don't recommend it. It's obviously had autofocusing issues. I want to get one that's just a manual, um, that does manual focusing, so I can just set it and leave it there. I try to make marks on the intake and head when port matching so that when I bolt the manifold on for good, it's not misaligned. That's a good idea. Sometimes I have to do that when we're flow testing weird heads. I put location marks on it. I port match only because a guy wanted me to. I also did port work like David recommended, plus used my borescope to check alignment. That's good. On some of the single plane intake manifolds, it's certainly easy to see at least the two center ports. You can kind of see that they're lined up fairly well. Sometimes the outer ones are a little bit harder to see. It's easier to see if you have a dual quad tunnel ram or a high ram where everything's exposed. That's kind of nice. Or a 4500 Dominator flange single plane is easier too. On an application that runs a different type fuel that requires richer mixture, I wouldn't want to leave the lower half of the port as a spot where fuel could pool. So you're worried about the head port overhanging the intake port? And then fuel puddling on that edge? Isn't the injector going to inject it past that point? The small displacement makes a little cam sound bigger than it is. It does. It certainly does. The smaller motor. The big motors kind of tame them. See how our pole is doing. I'm going to scroll back up on my... Let's see. Here we go. Way back in the 80s, a 351 Cleveland 4V intake would work on a 2V head, and it is said to pick up 35 horsepower despite the mismatch. I don't know that much about a 2V. Did the factory make 2V 4-barrel intake manifolds? Or were they all aftermarket? I can't remember if the 2V head had 4-barrel manifolds also. Is there a ratio between valve size and port size? Yes, you could. The problem is that the port flow and the port size might not be directly linked. And the other thing that happens with port volume, which guys might use, but the length of the port is going to alter port volume too. So you can't directly compare those. I've only matched port match an iron head. I'm scared to port match an aluminum head. Is it more cost effective going Navigator 5.4 or Coyote F-150 engine? Well, I've never seen a Coyote and even a Coyote F-150 engine in any of the wrecking yards I go to, but we have seen a lot of Navigators, and those are a few $100s. There isn't anything special about those in terms of the pricing structure. So if there's a 1/4-inch ridge between the head and the intake port, so what intake would you be putting on where there would be a 1/4-inch ridge, and especially a 1/4-inch ridge on both sides, or the top and the bottom? It seems like a lot. Usually port match is nowhere near that, and to have it on one side would mean that what are you doing there, Milo? Would mean that the intake manifold, the casting has, or the head casting has core shift in it, and it's moved around. But I've run stuff like I've run rec port intake manifolds on peanut port heads, and so there is, I'm sure, like a 1/2-inch mismatch on that, and yet The air still finds a way. Just watched an episode of Engine Masters port matching the big block, and they gained 12 horsepower. I'd like to see that. I'm going to have to ask Brule. Thanks. What did you find on the 6X heads? I haven't been over to take a look at them again. I don't. The one that I had, the photo that I had, Thumper didn't have any designation where you showed me. Maybe it's on the other head. I'll have to take a look at it and see. Really enjoying these live streams, as my job has been making me very happy lately. Helps me focus on things to do. That's good, man. We're here for you. We're here for you, Austin. Never done it myself. I have ported Iron Eagles and bow tie. Huge difference. Man, porting iron heads is not fun. Blower intakes are easy to see the port match. Yeah, because there's almost no render length there. Sean, so you made power with the go-kart stuff by port matching? Sean, I've always heard when it came to airflow in the port, it's better to fall off a cliff rather than hit a wall with a smaller intake port in comparison to cylinder head port work. Okay, yes, there would be no reason to if and especially if the port in the intake manifold is consistent, and so having it flare out like right at the end and then go into the port. I think guys would argue that, well, if you what's the matter? What happened, mister? Oh, what happened? Milo. If you tapered it very gradually, but it'd mean getting in there pretty far to do it. I haven't run into it personally, but I've seen some of the Oldsmobile guys show smog 455 heads with very bad port alignment to the intake and bottom overlap. I've seen that sort of thing where basically it's just a shifting because the intake and the head don't line up very well. And the port matching I'm talking about is just making sure that both rectangles are the same. Look on all those pads. It might be in the back, hard to see sometimes. Yeah, I'll take pictures of every. I thought I took pictures of every number that was on all of the heads, but I think I only did it on one of each of them. So I'll look at both of them. You need to go out. Watch out, Mido. Okay. What's the matter? Who are you? That's probably just the male person, Mido. It's probably just the male. Are you gonna stay out there? Well, you gotta stay out there now. He's on guard duty. He's walking perimeter. Just porting my first set of 5-liter heads. Remember, do the bowl. What about swirl and port turbulence for fuel atomization? Swirl designed into the bowl area, you mean? I port matched the G10 head because there's not a larger gasket this way. I had a reference to how far I could bring the intake runners out and help port alignment. I'll go make a short and post it on my channel of the number. I have some -8 6Xs sitting around. Okay. I heard people installing M122 blowers on 5.4 four valves. Well, but that's that's what a Shelby, that's what the GT500 is. Our rules allow an inch of port matching under the intake and heads. I don't know what you mean by navigator is a trinity. They had the 5.4 and the 5.8 had two different blowers used on them, but they're both 5.4 four valve motors. I started with port matching on the SRT4 and then really opened it up once I was chasing past 600. Let's see how our poll is doing. 61% have say that they have port match stuff. Port matching iron heads, the gain is weight loss. Well, something we argued there, trying to get as much weight out of those things, especially big block Chevy heads or iron heads, are just ridiculous. Richard, can you run LS heads on a new L8T block? I don't know. I've never even seen an L8T block. Getaway, your goals for the future are to build an engine from each brand, from like every manufacturer ever that has produced a motor. I just love the motor engine, guys. Jeffrey, yeah, we were talking about Pontiac 6X heads. Yeah, 5.4 Navigator motor is a good place to start. That's the one that we have up on the channel, is the one that we did 1,000 horsepower with at like 17 pounds with 2 turbos on it. Oliver does have videos of the Nova up, yeah. I think his is foreign auto, right? Go ahead and search. Yeah, foreign automobiles. FOREIGN AUTOMOBILES. Nova 305 first fire. Look at that thing. That thing's sweet. So everybody go check out Oliver's YouTube channel. Foreign automobiles. Richard, are you going to do any more porting and then power testing? Like, what is blending the bowls, deshrouding, bigger valves, back cut? We actually tried to do that out at Brian Tooley Racing, and it just didn't work out very well. But I would like to do that. Let's see. Maybe I should go back to the Ironhead for the 408 LS. That's never the answer. Sergeant, that's true. With the cost of a good blow-through carburetor converting to EFI becomes attractive, the carb can cost as much as an ECU or more in some cases. That's probably true. Let's see. So you have a thread build or a build thread, Oliver, up too? Larry, just do a YouTube search for foreign automobiles and it comes right up. It'll be the first thing that comes up. Richard, do you spend extra time to polish exhaust ports after porting them? No, I don't do any porting on those. And when I did the only porting I've done personally where I did airflow testing, I've done some on the 3800 head, the iron one, and then I did some on 706 heads, but we mainly on the 706 heads we mainly did chamber deshrouding. But on the 3800 I did some intake and exhaust bowl work basically. But for me personally, the making them polished, the surface finish, I don't think changes the airflow. Casey, I do want to try the hole saw porting technique. Boost really is the answer. Ever thought of a deck extension sleeve build, Richard, with the sleeve going into a slotted head? I don't know what you mean. For an LSV8, or are you talking about a two-stroke? How hard do you think it's going to be to spool an S488 with a 132 T6 housing with a Barra? Considering changing rear housing to something smaller, do you need to make the kind of power that an S488 is going to make on the Barra? I mean, are you trying to do, I don't know, 1,500 horsepower? Richard, what do you think of Buick Straight 8 dual carb is worth? I have no idea. I've never even looked at those, so I don't know what the price is. But yeah, I gotta make sure. Let's see. First fire up. I'm all fired up. I'm already subscribed. Oh wait, no, was I not? Oh, I was not subscribed. Sorry about that. I thought that I had clicked that already. Yeah, and that's an 88 488. That's going to be a lot. But if you're looking for the big monster power, okay, yeah, 1,500 is your goal. Then you need a 1,500 horsepower turbo. I don't know that I would necessarily have picked a T6 though for a 4-liter displacement. I probably would have picked a T4 if they make that. Adrian, I didn't kick anybody out. I probably should have, but yep, that's right, Dean. We have boundary layers when stuff is flowing, which is also why the heat soak myth is a myth. So it's really hard to get the surface of something like an air intake tube to transmit heat into fast moving air. The transmission rate is very, very low because of the boundary layer. And then if the air is moving fast, there's not time for it to happen. So we're at 62% saying yes. A bit off topic, just curious, but plan on doing any more herping vids this spring. I think I will. I didn't get out hardly at all last year. I think I probably only caught, I don't know, 10 or 15 snakes total, which is very, very low for me. Usually it's 100 and something. And I just didn't go out and look. I just didn't have time. Just got to make the time. I did take a couple trips on but I didn't find any when I took a trips on the Trail 90. I went out in the country and did some, just looking for stuff on the side of the road. And I found a lot of stuff, especially if you go out by the dump. People drive out toward the dump and then dump everything on the side of the road. Not cool. I would have gone T4, but I got the turbo at a good price. There you go. I wonder if you could do a T4 to T6 adapter, but have some of the adapter go into the turbine housing flange to neck it down to get that speed up. What do I do with the snakes? I just catch them and take pictures of them and let them go. Mike, like people say, a remote mount turbo doesn't need an intercooler because the long tube acts as a linear intercooler. Yeah, no. They obviously haven't measured charge temperature going into the intake manifold because it's still hot. If there's boost there, it would still be hot. I'm building a 35 Chevy truck rod, but already set up with a 292. That's good. 292s are cool. Sneaky Pete for the Trail 90. Nah, it doesn't need that, but it does need like 1 pound of boost or something. You want to see the 292 boosted again? Have you ever port matched your throttle body to the intake? No, I haven't done that. The only time I would do that I would be tempted to do that, is if I tried for some reason to put a really big throttle body on like a 90 millimeter throttle body on a 78 millimeter opening or an 80 millimeter opening. Then you definitely want to try to address that. But again, if you're just doing the port match and it goes from 90 and then goes in past and then immediately goes to 80, that may be worse. And the air may come in and all jam up in the middle and build pressure, but we're building boost there. Unless I could port the manifold all the way in to the common plenum and make everything 90, I just don't know that I would do that. Although we did used to run tapered EGR spacers for bigger throttle bodies. Recal, I know. I would like to do the non-invasive species thing, or the invasive species thing, not a non-invasive. Yeah, pythons would be cool. I've never handled something that size, but it would be. I would try it. It'd be cool. Blue collar went back to the dyno today. No more converter issues, but zero change in peak power. Were we able to increase timing to 26.5 from 24? LQ4, 862s, Chopacabra cam, and it didn't change going up 2 degrees in timing. It didn't change power. Barry, would increasing the bar of the piston by itself? I don't know what you mean by bar. I have a Studebaker Hawk centrifugal blower. Is that pre-Paxton? Is it a McCullough? I mean, you could try doing a junkyard LS with a deck extension like an LSR. Oh, so do you want me just to do a tall deck block, I guess? Have you ever tested those as seen on TV, the tornadoes? Yeah, the tornadoes they're not good. It's hard to keep the tornado going all the way into the valve. An Audi 2.7 liter turbo. Not going to run one of those on the engine dyno. I did run I have videos up on the RHS tall deck block stuff that I did. That was 495 inches, I think. So it was a 4.5-inch stroke, I think. I want to port the elbow on a drive-by-wire 4.6 on a drive-by-wire 4.62V and see little or no power gain. Exactly, Scott. He's a wicked star. I have an NA Barra 12-1 using ITBs and a decent set of cams. Power drops off well before the cams stop making power. Tuner thinks it's my 3-inch hooker arrow chamber. Well, taking the header or taking the muffler off is a really easy thing to do. Just take it off and put a piece of tubing there and see if it does anything. I honestly would be surprised if a 3-inch exhaust on a 12-1 4-liter Barra is holding the power back at RPM, but it's like I said, it's really easy to test. Vern, always port matches your intake, heads, and manifold. That's weird, blue collar. Wonder what's going on. Oh, you have to have golf ball dimples to keep the tornado going? I didn't realize that those needed to be a match set. Have I ever built a budget flow bench? I haven't. I think guys have with vacuums and stuff, but have you ever put a square port blower manifold on peanut port heads? Yes. On a you're talking about a big block Chevy, right? Yes, we have. When you were testing the 351 400M, did you ever test with Kazi heads? No, that I did that test before he had those heads. Forgot to hit live chat. I did hit live chat. Doesn't a turbo perform better after multiple dyno runs due to heat in the exhaust system? It does on ours, yeah, but it's sometimes it's not multiple ones. Sometimes it does it after the first or maybe the first or second one. Or if we keep it loaded for a while before we try to run it. Blue collar, if you tell me that there was no gain, there was no gain. I don't need to see it. Okay, Thumper, I'll take a look at that. Those heads. Could you run air compressor air through a regulator and intake and gain power? Are you thinking about using an air compressor to add airflow into the motor? Is that what you're doing? Somebody already makes a compressed air supercharger, and that works really, really well. But it takes a lot of air and a very complex valving setup. Would a 177 blower be more restriction than just blowing through a typical carb manifold with a turbo? It depends on what you're trying to get done. If you're trying to look cool and have a blower and a turbo, then no, it works perfect. If you're trying to make lots of power with a turbo combination, that blower is just going to be in the way. If you're trying to have a really big turbo and then spool it up better, then a blower will help because it'll make more low-speed power. So again, it just depends on what you're trying to do. Having the blower there is not as good ultimately in terms of power production as just having the turbo there. The McCullough, yeah. Yeah, it depends on what year it is, but that may have had it should be a centrifugal blower, and I think McCullough was the only one that did those. Richard, are you lifting weights? No, or just cardio? No. I need to do at least one of them. I've done a little bit of running, but not very much. I've been getting up early and taking the puppies out, if that counts. Let's see. Casey said Hot Rod Magazine did a homemade flow bench a few years back. You can look online and see. There's probably lots of them on YouTube. Fascist. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see the tennis ball fuzz. I'd like it to be fairly long though, so it would go with the direction of the reflected waves, so we could actually see it waving in the wind. Big Block Chevy, does it cause lots of turbulence and problems with fuel staying suspended? Does what cause that? Zoo truck? I'm going to try to scroll back and see what your original question was. Oh, we were only running stuff at wide open throttle, so I don't know what it was doing at part throttle and stuff. But like I said, the air found its way in there, and it made power. I didn't compare it to something else because we didn't have a peanut port blower manifold. We just had that one. That might be one application where I would be where I might be tempted to just at least roll back the edges of the peanut port, because the mismatch was a lot. But you know, if you're trying to make a lot of power with a blown big block, you're not going to have peanut ports on it anyways. Any Ford FE engine testing in the future? I do. I have maybe access to a 390, and I would kind of like to try that. I've done port matching, but mostly matching the intake to the gasket. Heads were usually close enough. When we did Engine Masters, I matched everything. I was really most interested in making sure and I also pinned the manifold, because I was mostly interested in the manifold, making sure that the manifold matched that the head port and the manifold port were the same. That they were located and not offset. I put a BTR Stage 3 cam. My C5 Corvette has been tuned. It runs good. It just doesn't pull as hard as it could. What would be the benefits of a 3600 stall? Do you have a stock stall converter in there now? It should feel a lot more spirited with a 3600 stall in it. AJ, so you did extrude honing, but with a vacuum and sand? I remember a guy telling me that he did it with cement too, which I thought was interesting. Pin the manifold. We put pins in it to locate it, so that it goes on the same way every time. We also pinned the and I didn't do this. Actually, Keith Wilson did, because that was the manifold that I started out with was a Wilson ported. Oh, I take that back. Because we first started with a Wilson ported single plane, a Super Victor, and that was pinned also. It was pinned to, I think it was pinned to a carb spacer, which I thought was interesting. Admiral, are fighting sniper issues? Snipers in the tree line. So 60%, I'm going to go ahead and close our poll. 60% saying they have gasket matched. Yeah, you're just locating it just with dowels. was thinking adding air might act like a turbo NOS and maybe add some temporary. It depends on how much you could get in there, but that's the work that they had to do on the compressor air supercharging. The compressor air supercharging was really cool because there was no parasitic loss associated with driving anything because all of that was done off-site relative to the engine. It just had stored cylinders of the compressed air. You don't have any heat associated with it, because the turbo people that are anti-turbo complain that, oh, you put all that heat into it, blah, 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 and that you have back pressure and so you lose power from the turbo. The jury's out on that. But what they do is just add a whole bunch of airflow, and when you release the compressed air, the temperature of the air is below zero. So they were doubling the power output at around 7 or 8 pounds. So it was kind of a cool deal. Anyone ever installed injector bungs in a carb manifold at home? I haven't done that at home, but we've had that done. I think Mahovitz probably did the last ones for us. Any testing on a Bravo 335 big block head sold by Skip White? I have not. But a 335 head should flow pretty well. Two more minutes. I gotta go get the puppies. Take them out, let them run. 2-minute warning. $335 heads on a 496. That's more than enough. I don't know how much power you're trying to make. And if it's an NA motor, I would be more apt to go with a bigger head. Although with 335 heads, we've made more than 800 horsepower. So it's certainly possible given the flow rates of some of that stuff. Would separating the turbine and compressor by a bigger distance help heat? Did anybody see the and this will be the last thing that I got to get going. But did anybody see the post that somebody made on Sloppy where they took the turbo apart and then they put a pulley to drive the turbo, and they've made a centrifugal supercharger basically. So they're using a pulley to drive they're driving the hot side. So they put it on the shaft, and everyone's like, yeah, that's not going to work. I complimented the guy. I'm like, dude, this is just awesome. I said, I don't even care if it works. I said, if you start it up and it immediately frags itself, that's still cool. Look at what you did. Look at what you tried. And we have to support people that try stuff like that. So I'm surprised nobody's talked about that. What about the 325 airflow enforcers? Those are also good heads. And you can look at the flow rate and determine how much power they'll support. Yeah, 4060E, you're already making enough power that could be a problem. February of Huskies. I love Huskies. They're awesome. Yeah, go check out the Sloppy post. It's pretty cool. But on that note, I do have to get going. I got more stuff to do. Always stuff to do. Always stuff. Now Milo is wondering why he got locked out. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will be back tonight, although I missed last night because we were doing a bunch of stuff, but I will be back tonight. Pow, zing to the moon.